Travis Head delivers Pat Cummins a birthday bash with Justin Langer left to pick up the pieces. World Cup winning mentality. Just what does it take to lift the coveted trophy? Aaron Finch and Michael Clarke have the answers. And will Mumbai's leadership woes leak into India's World Cup campaign? Let's go around the wicket. Hello and welcome to Around the Wicket. I'm Neroli Meadows. I've got Callum Ferguson back alongside us, and Aaron Finch is back in the country after a couple of entertaining months at the Indian Premier League. I've got to say though, Finchy, your timing couldn't have been worse to be missing out in India, because your old mate Travis Head put on an absolute clinic overnight. It was the Sunrisers up against Lucknow Super Giants. They posted 165 for 4, and the Sunrisers chased that down within 10 overs. A 10-wicket win. The numbers for Travis Head: 89 not out off 30, a strike rate, if you don't mind, of 296.67. Astonishing stuff.
Unbelievable stuff. I mean, he's in rich form at the moment, and the way that he destroyed spin in this game, they came with, I think, 4 overs in the power play, and it's one of the best shots I've ever seen there. That is in the top 2 shots I've ever seen. Wow. That's just extraordinary from Travis Head. And one area that teams have tried to target him is with spin early, and he answered that question last night, no question. It was unbelievable, just brutal hitting.
Best shot you've ever seen, or top 2?
Top 2 for sure. Virat Kohli, MCG against Harris Ralph. Oh, yeah. That's probably number 1 still for me. But the technical side of the shot over wide long off to a spinner off the back foot, no momentum going through the ball. Yep. That is just pure skill, timing, the ability to get your weight back through the ball somehow. From a technical point of view, it's perfect.
His strike rate now, opening as well, is over 200 this season. To put that into perspective, Ferg, you've got Andre Russell in 2019, not an opener. He was striking at 205, scoring 510 runs. So we're looking at players who've scored more than 500 runs for the IPL season. Travis Head comes in at number 2, 533 at a strike rate of 202. And then Glenn Maxwell, once again, bats down the order. 2014, that remarkable season he had, 552 runs at a strike rate of 188. Just put it into context for us, just how well he is going right now.
Well, we're talking about the absolute cream of the crop when it comes to talent, and Travis Head is still relatively new to IPL cricket. He's been over there, he's sat on the sidelines a lot, but he hasn't been in the cauldron quite as often as some of these names here. He's showing them just how good he is right now. He is at the top of the tree with Dre Russ for a reason. His ball striking is in a class of its own at the moment in world cricket. We've seen it in 3 formats, not just IPL T20 cricket around the world domestically. We're seeing it in international cricket across 3 formats. That's unheard of. And he's taken the game to new frontiers, and it's wonderful to see. I was very fortunate to watch him on the way through at the South Australian Redbacks, and he's been showing this sort of ball striking for a long, long time. But his belief at the moment is in a stratosphere.
It's just coming together, isn't it?
It's really enjoyable as well, watching the memes and the humour from the Indian fans, basically saying every time Travis Head sees a shirt in blue, he just goes absolutely ballistic.
Absolutely.
But as an opener as well, and he's come out and said, this is great preparation for me for the World Cup, because in the Caribbean I need to take on those spinners, and he's feeling more and more comfortable doing just that. Yeah,
at the start of the tournament there was a question mark over him against spin, and having 2 left-handers, his partnership with Abhishek Sharma at the top of the order, he destroys spin. So the teams try to go off spin to tie Trav up, but then Abhishek smacks it. Now they're both smacking it. Yeah. So I think it is a great preparation for him, because the wickets in the West Indies, they will turn. They'll be lower, they'll be slower than what we see in India at the moment. So it'll be a great preparation for him, but the numbers are just off the charts.
And being able to capitalise on that power play over in the West Indies, just like you've said, slower wickets, so it gets harder as the innings goes. You've just got to capitalise early, and to have Travis Head in such great form is great signs for Australia.
If only he was there with Jake Fraser-McGurk, who responded with his 4th IPL 50. Ferg, you want to see Jake Fraser-McGurk in there, don't you? He's responded to not being picked in the best possible way.
Yeah, he has. It's the only way he could have gone about it, and it's great to hear him talk about it. He's not viewing it as a snub. He's viewing it as more
Well, it's not a snub. It's not a snub. David Warner is there. He's one of the all-time great players in T20 cricket. So it's definitely not a snub.
I think there's an ability and there's manoeuvrability about our top order in the Australian team where if JFM was to end up in the squad at some point, that he could easily slot into the top spot along with Heady. And Davey's got the ability to bat throughout the top six, in my opinion. He's done it before. If it was required, he could do it again. I'd love to see JFM get a crack in this World Cup.
Every time there's a World Cup comes around, people say, oh, maybe we can slide Warner down to fit somebody else in.
Yeah.
And every time it happens, it doesn't work.
Yep.
But every time he bats at the top, it seems to work. So I understand what you're saying, but playing international cricket is different to playing IPL cricket, playing domestic cricket. The games aren't going to be 240 games, 250 games like we've seen throughout the IPL. They've got the impact sub. You can name your team after the toss. So there's so many factors that go into scores being so big. Teams have got 8 genuine batsmen in their side and then 5 genuine bowlers still. So there's no holes in oppositions anymore. So it'll be a different game. So yes, I would love to see him playing as well. But David Warner, the experience that he brings and the record that he brings in World Cups trumps that for me.
So if you were trying to fit them in, would you have JFM at 3 instead?
No, it's either one or the other.
One or the other? Okay.
Yeah. I don't see... With Mitch Marsh batting at 3, then I don't see how all 4 of those guys can fit in the top 3. And whichever way you decide to go...
Could you move Mitch down to 4?
Glenn Maxwell's a pretty good player.
Yeah. Yeah. Could he move down?
Yeah, he could, of course, but he won't.
Yep.
So on that very point, you've got 3 out of the top 4 either not playing or out of form. Davey's not playing at the moment. I know you will back him in to the end of time, and his record suggests that we should be backing him in. He's injured with the thumb. He's not playing. He wasn't in great aggressive form when he was playing in the IPL. Do you have concerns over that top 4 for Australia?
No, I think Mitch coming off a hamstring injury, from all reports, he's recovering really well. He's been up in Brisbane hitting some balls and making sure that he's ready to go. So he'll be fine. And I think for the guys at the very top of the game, and we're talking the very best players in the world now, it's not about how many runs you've got leading in or how many balls you've hit. It's generally a mental freshness and an ability to go over there with a real clear mind that will separate the teams at the end of the day. Because I think as soon as you go in fatigued or mentally a bit drained, it just becomes so much more difficult. So I think having guys fresh as opposed to in form, excuse me, is more important.
Well, that's a really good point you make. And there is a silver lining to some of our guys having some niggles and not playing every game, particularly the captain. There could be a silver lining here for Mitch Marsh to go into that World Cup fresh, not having gone through a gruelling full tournament of IPL cricket. It could actually give him the freshen up. We've seen this Australian side perform really well when it hasn't necessarily been the perfect preparation.
Well, they've played so much together.
Yeah.
So by now they've played so much together that they understand how everyone goes about their business. So I don't see any issues with how much people are playing or the form that they're in.
And we're going to talk more about this, what it takes to captain a team to a World Cup when things aren't necessarily going to plan, with yourself and Michael Clarke coming up. But Glenn Maxwell, great mate of yours. We had him on this show. You gave us wonderful insights about what he's going through mentally and physically. He's having not a great IPL, let's be honest. What do you think's going wrong for your former housemate?
Well, I think the expectation of the way that he plays is one thing, and it's one thing that he loves to live up to as well, and be the aggressive player. And his numbers in T20 cricket, that's extraordinary. To average 30 to strike rate of 155, that's unbelievable in international cricket. I mean, and that's playing against good opposition. We don't. Australia don't have the luxury of playing against a lot of the sort of tier 2 teams that. Have to qualify for World Cup, so that's an unbelievable record. At the moment, I think that the way that the game's going is forcing him to probably be more aggressive in his first 2 or 3 balls as opposed to balls number 7, 8, 9, and it doesn't sound like much, but that's a huge advantage to weigh up conditions, get a read on what's happening out in the middle. So he's just being forced into making those decisions earlier, and I don't think he's batting badly. It's not going overly well, but that's happened before, and I mean, the 50-over World Cup was a pretty good example of that as well.
Oh, exactly right.
Partiv Patel has come out and said he's the most overrated player in the history of the IPL. Thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a bit filthy about that comment. I don't think there's any need for that sort of statement. If you look over... Yeah, it is, isn't it, a little bit? I think that when you look at a number of great players that have played IPL cricket over a long period of time, I look at Glenn Maxwell's record in IPL cricket, 132 games, averaging 25 at a strike rate of 156. They're pretty good numbers still for a guy that bats predominantly at 5 and 6. Now, when we look at, Brendan McCullum's career, he played 109 games, averaging 27 and a half at 131. Rohit Sharma, 255 games, averaging 29 and a half at 131. It really depends on where you're batting. Now, Glenn's numbers are quite often, he's going to go through a run of outs from time to time. So his average might be a bit low, but his strike rate is through the roof. So he wins you games of cricket when he gets going, just like the other two do, but the numbers look so different. So I think, for me, that statement I just don't like it. I think it unnecessary and certainly not something that I believe is anywhere near the right mark.
Strong stuff from Callum Ferguson
like
there, bringing up the Indian captain to defend Glenn Maxwell.
And again, he's one of the great players, isn't he? But Glenn Maxwell bats in a different position.
Don't go anywhere. This is Around the Wicket, and up next we're going to bring in another former captain, and that is Michael Clarke. What does it take to win a World Cup? Two World Cup winning captains on Around the Wicket. We've got Aaron Finch, who won Australia's men's first title in the T20 World Cup in 2021, and Michael Clarke, who led the way for Australia, which Finch was also a part of, at the ODI World Cup in 2015. Pup joins us now. Michael, thanks so much for your time after spending the last few weeks in India. Mitch Marsh is a new captain at a World Cup. Yes, he did it in the under-19s. We should add that. But he's got a few challenges, a few out-of-form players, a few players that are injured, including himself at the moment. If you look back into that time, 2015, similar sort of build-up, you were injured yourself, question marks over the team at home. What advice would you be giving to Mitch Marsh heading into this World Cup to galvanise the group?
2015 is a long time ago, Ned. I think the parts that I probably remember were the most difficult was trying to get the balance between looking after the team as captain and doing everything you can, but then I was under a huge injury cloud as well. So I also then had to make sure I was doing everything required to even get on the park. So I think there was, it was probably that mindset that needed to find a balance for both. And Finchy and Ferg, both captain teams in the past, they'll tell you when you captain, generally I found it easier when you just focused on the team and you become, the second worry. You knew your job, you knew you had to make runs, but I think that probably helped my batting when I was focused on the team first. But when you're going through an injury, that balance is really difficult because you cannot afford to miss a session. You cannot afford to not be there mentally. You cannot afford to not do your ice, do your recovery, go see the physio. It's 24/7. So I think Mitch has probably got that balance, certainly at the moment, leading up to game one in the Caribbean for this World Cup. He's got to make sure he's on the park first and foremost, because you can be a great leader off the field, but he's going to be most important on the field as well. So just getting that balance right, I think, is a really important one for Mitch at the minute.
In 2021, Finchy, not many people gave Australia much of a hope, a really appalling run of form as a team heading into that World Cup. What do you think was the key to getting the best out of that group as a captain?
Well, it was slightly different because it was a COVID bubble at the time, so that brought everyone together naturally, and the ability to hang out 24/7 over a campaign was really cool, actually, and something that I guess no one had really experienced right throughout their career, because you'd always have families at a World Cup and commitments to do with the ICC or your Australian sponsors. So there's always other things to take away from just the team environment. So that was a really, really interesting time, and it was brilliant. We had the most fun ever. And I just remember all we talked about was impact. We didn't talk about we want to have the leading run scorer or the leading wicket taker. We just needed impact from particular players at whatever the game required. So, for example, Steve Smith slid down to number 5 outside the power play. So you go from a guy who's grown up wanting to make hundreds, wanting to make bulk amount of runs, and that's what you're trained to do as a batsman. But then we had to change his mindset to say, we don't need, if you're batting at 5, we don't need 60 runs. We might need 25 off 10 balls. So just changing your mindset there. So that's what our conversations were mainly about in that regard.
How tough were those conversations, and would they happen one-on-one or as a group so that everyone knew what the group mentality was?
You'd always have chats as a group, but never in a structured meeting. And this was the difference about the time, was everyone was hanging out together, whether it was in someone's room or in the area that you could hang out and eat or whatever it was. Everyone was there, so you're always talking about the way that you wanted to play and things that you wanted to implement around the team. And so those conversations happened really naturally, and they were never aggressive one-on-one conversations. It was just, right, how can we help you get to this level, or we want to change this slightly, so how can we do that that best benefits both of us in that regard. So I think long gone are the days of the big long team meetings where people get called out. That's just not really a part of it anymore. It's more purely down to one-on-one conversations with coaches or captains or players in small groups.
But what was that like for you, having those one-on-one conversations? And for example, take a David Warner at the moment, not in the best of form, not playing, but we know what he's capable of at these World Cups. How do you make sure that he doesn't go and look after the individual and make sure he looks after the team and, as you say, Finchy, that impact rather than runs?
Well, I think it's never personal. I think that's, at the end of the day, as the captain of the team, you're trying to do what's best for the team because you want to win. So if that means, your opening batter bats at 6-1 game and opens the next, if that means, Mitchell Starc, who's accustomed to open the bowls first change because they're the conditions and that's the opposition you're playing against, then that's what you do. I think those conversations happen regularly or in the teams I played with. And as a player, I think every batsman wants to open the batting in T20 cricket. It's the best place to bat, but you can't have 11 opening batters. So if your position is what's best for the team at number 4 or number 6, then, you look forward to that. That's a part of playing a team sport. And I think the key is to be honest. I think, as Finchy just mentioned, when it's senior players, it becomes a little more important because their influence around the group. So off the field, you got breaks between games at a World Cup campaign, for example. So you don't want, if David Warner's not going to play the first game, you don't want David Warner to be, sulking for the next 5 days until game 2 to see if he gets a crack, because he's a senior player. He can bring other players down. He can pull players to his team, to his side. If it's, him versus the captain or the senior players or the selectors, it's the last thing you need. And I think that comes into selecting a tour as well. There's 15 players on the tour, only 11 can play. So, it's a big part of travelling the world playing for Australia because you spend so much time together. You need to be able to respect the selectors, the leadership, whatever decisions are made, as long as you can respect it. You don't have to like it, but as long as you can respect it, I think the team generally gets on with it. And I think these days in cricket, if you can't handle that, you won't make it. You travel too much, you'll get found out, you'll be left behind as a player if you can't do what's best for the team.
And that's what's great about this team now, and probably for the last couple of years under Pat Cummins' leadership as well, is that they've been together so long and such a core group of players that those conversations are so easy, and everyone has them with each other as well. So if there's a time when someone's struggling personally, there'll be 4 or 5 guys to pull them to the side and say, this is impacting the group somehow, or if it's a playing thing, right, have you tried doing this? We remember as a group we talked about we wanted to play this way, but just seemed the last game you went slightly away from it. So come on, you've got to be with us here. And I think that's been the one strength of the Australian group that's been a constant over the last couple of years.
So
I look back to that World Cup that you captained, Finchy, and my understanding is that was quite a strong feature of your group back then. Mitch Marsh, I reckon you've spoken publicly about him being a really crucial cog in that building of the culture.
Well, he is, because he's someone who, and Pup knows, and everyone knows in teams, you have alliances one way or the other. And it's just a natural thing. People are friendlier with some people in the group and not with others, and that's fine. That's a part of being in a squad of 15 plus 15 support staff and everyone else that goes around. There's going to be groups. And Mitch Marsh is the one person over a long period that's able to bounce between a lot of different groups and have no alliances, no allegiances. He's just great around the group. And if someone needs a smile on their face, they turn to Mitch. And yeah, he's great around the group.
Now we know to have those hard conversations, as you say, but the balance between holding people accountable but also backing them in to continue to be fearless the way that they are at the moment. But off the back of the allegiances, it's interesting part with the Mumbai Indians. You've got Rohit Sharma replaced as captain by Hardik Pandya. It has not gone to plan, by the way, for either Gujarat Titans or the Mumbai Indians, Hardik's former team. Then you go into the World Cup, Rohit Sharma is the captain and Hardik is his deputy. How is this going to go? You can't tell me it's not going to leak in, even just slightly.
You know what? Knowing Rohit Sharma, I don't think it will, because I think he'll wrap his arms around Hardik. And I think that shows the character that Rohit is. He's the Indian captain, and trust me, he wants to win that World Cup. He's had a lot of say in the 15 that's been picked for India. It's very different to, say, the Australian 15. They're going to heavily focused on spin bowling. And like I say, he had a huge say in that. So I think if the beef was as strong as what people think, Hardik wouldn't be in that World Cup campaign. The Indian captain has that much power. So I think, look, there's obviously issues with how Rohit was released from his duties as captain of Mumbai. But I don't think that'll go into, in regards to, I don't think it'll affect their friendship. I don't think it'll affect selection come World Cup time. I don't think it will affect Rohit Sharma. I think that he'll make sure Hardik is as focused as possible. I think you've seen in the last couple of games as well, Hardik knows he has to be batting and bowling. And he needs to improve his game from where it's been in the first half of the IPL. So right now, I think it'll be based on performance. As long as Hardik's performing, Rohit knows how important he is to that Indian team.
I totally agree. I don't think it'll leak into the Indian team one bit. Just the one thing that I would have loved to have seen from Rohit throughout the IPL campaign is to just make some kind of public statement, because the resentment towards Hardik from the public has been unbelievable, getting booed. And it's changed since the World Cup's been announced, actually. It's changed to cheers when he walks out to the toss. But for 8 games, he was getting booed walking out to the toss at Mumbai Indians game. So I would have just loved to have seen Rohit come out and say something publicly, say, no, this was a part of a plan for the Mumbai Indians and Hardik's got my full support. I think that would have put everything to bed so quick.
Humans are still humans, though.
Oh, they are. Absolutely.
Especially in India, because they support players more so than teams, I guess.
And highly emotional as well. And they really do. They're just probably more passionate than any fans in the world.
Yeah.
We'll have to watch this space. I'm sure we'll be talking about it in the weeks to come over the World Cup. Michael Clarke, thank you very much for joining us on Around the Wicket. We'll see you next week. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to ask this man, Aaron Finch, the great of the Renegades, who should be their next coach. The Melbourne Renegades need a new coach in the Big Bash. This man is a champion of the club. You retired over the summer. Who's going to be the next coach? Who do you want to be the next coach?
It's a good question. I think that there's a few things that need to be looked at with the new coach. I think the way that T20 is changing, the whole landscape and the way that the game's being played, I think it needs to be either a really experienced coach or quite a new modern coach that can connect with players on that level. Because there's no doubt that in the last probably 2 years, the game has gone to a different level, even to when I was captaining Australia. It's just, especially domestically, it's gone to a different level. So with Will Sutherland being the captain there, a young captain who obviously does it for Victoria, does a great job. He was brilliant at the Renegades last year when he had his opportunities. I think he would benefit really well from a coach that is really tactically sound as well. So for me, just throwing those things together, you get Cameron White, who's someone who's come out of Victoria, but then gone away and done some hard yards with New South Wales and the Sixers program under Greg Shippert as well, and coached a little bit as an assistant in the US. So I think that he's probably the one that stands out the most on being tactically as good as anyone that I've ever played with, but also knows the modern game, knows technique unbelievably well. So just that ability to connect with young players makes him, in my opinion, the right choice.
I'll tell you what, you built up to that one.
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Cameron White is the man that you've dropped, though. Do you want to be involved? Do you want to play a role as a coach, as an assistant, as a selector, as anything?
I think I'll be there in some capacity next year. In what that looks like, I'm unsure at the minute, but definitely in some capacity. I mean, it's been a club that I played with from the first year, and I've loved every minute of being there. Ferg played there for a number of years as well. So it's been a big part of my life and my family's life as well. So if I can contribute in any way possible, I will.
And I know one thing for sure, you'll be back on Around the Wicket next summer. We're not letting you go anywhere, Finchy. Don't go anywhere yourself, because we're going to take on the short stuff next, a special World Cup edition. Time to take on the short stuff, and it is a World Cup edition. Ferg, who's going to be the leading run scorer for the tournament?
Travis Head, his form in big games and tournaments over the last few years has been exceptional.
I can't go past Coley. I think he'll have a real point to prove.
Yeah. He's certainly going well for RCB in the IPL at the moment. Leading wicket taker, Ferg?
Yeah, look, I'm going to go with Rashid Khan. I think he's in for a big tournament. He's going to be champing at the bit. He's had a bit of a layoff over the last 12 months, so I think he's ready to go.
I think Kuldeep Yadav, another spinner. There's some soft opposition in there for a great Indian side, and he'll be right up there.
Who's going to be the young gun that sets the tournament alight?
Jaiswal, I think, for India. I think he's just been phenomenal over the last 2 years.
Well, he's been playing T20 cricket in Test cricket. So.
Just a bit like Travis Head across 3 formats. Incredible.
I've got Jaiswal and also Tristan Stubbs, who's been in good IPL form. He destroys it. He's a good player of spin, so I think that'll be a big factor.
Call.
What about the surprise packet? The team that's going to come from nowhere and just do what we're not expecting?
Yeah, I mentioned Rashid Khan before. I think Afghanistan, I think their spinners might have a big part to play.
West Indies for me. They've got all the power in the world.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that, because the West Indies, they've been struggling on the world form in World Cups in recent years. Haven't even been there for the ODI World Cup last year.
They're T20 specialists now, and they've got some players in good form. Nicholas Pooran, I think he's a point of difference in every team.
Yes.
West Indies one to watch. Shock results of the tournament. We love this. Surely you've got England in there, boys.
I actually don't, but I've got one that's maybe not so much of a surprise these days. Netherlands to beat South Africa. They just seem to keep doing it.
Wouldn't the shock be if South Africa beat the Netherlands?
Ireland to beat Pakistan for me.
Ireland to beat
beauty.
Pakistan.
That's
and
a beauty.
Finally, boys, who wins the World Cup? Take your Aussie caps off.
No, I can't. Australia win it.
Australia beat India in another final.
Love it.
Shots fired. Aaron Finch, Callum Ferguson, thanks so much for joining us. You'll both be back next week alongside Michael Clarke. See you then.